The fortress walls tremble. Beyond them, an army waits, not in disarray or panic, but in disciplined silence. At the head of this force sits a figure cloaked in battle-worn leather and royal insignia, surveying the city that has refused to surrender. This is not a siege born of desperation. This is calculated conquest. Strategic domination. The commander raises one hand, and 20,000 warriors shift in unison, a machine of war honed by years of relentless campaigning. The gates will fall. They always do. Not through brute force alone, though that is available in abundance, but through tactical brilliance that has broken kingdoms across West Africa. The figure removes her helmet. Queen Amina of Zaza, warrior sovereign, master strategist, the woman who built an empire when the world insisted women could only inherit them. This is her story. The story of how one woman conquered nations, not through marriage or intrigue, but through fire, steel, and a military mind that outthought every adversary she faced. Why have you never heard her name spoken in the same breath as Alexander, Caesar, or Genghis Khan? In the 15th century, the Hausa kingdoms of what is now northern Nigeria were centers of wealth, culture, and power. These were not primitive societies waiting for European civilization to arrive and enlighten them. These were sophisticated states with complex political structures, thriving trade networks that connected sub-Saharan Africa to North Africa and the Mediterranean world, and military traditions that produced formidable warriors. Among these kingdoms, Zaza, later known as Zaria, occupied a strategic position controlling vital trade routes. This was a world where power was constantly contested, where kingdoms rose and fell based on their ability to project military strength and control commerce. Into this dynamic, competitive environment, Queen Amina was born around 1533, though some sources place her birth earlier. She was the daughter of Queen Bakwa Turunku and Nikita, a high-ranking official in the Zaza court. From birth, Amina was positioned at the nexus of power, but position means nothing without capability, and capability must be cultivated. Hausa society, while patriarchal in many respects, had traditions that allowed for female leadership under certain circumstances. Queens could rule as regents or in their own right, though such occurrences were exceptional rather than routine. Amina's mother had become queen after the death of her husband, demonstrating that the path to female sovereignty existed, however narrow it might be. From her earliest years, Amina showed little interest in the domestic arts that were supposed to occupy noble girls. While other daughters of the court learned household management and diplomatic grace, Amina studied warfare. She trained with weapons, mastered horsemanship, and absorbed military strategy with an intensity that marked her as unusual even in a society that valued martial prowess. Her mother, recognizing both the exceptional nature of her daughter's abilities and the potential political value of a warrior princess, supported this unorthodox education. By her teenage years, Amina was accompanying Zaza's military forces on campaign, not as a symbolic figurehead but as an active participant. She learned warfare from the ground up, understanding supply lines and logistics, studying how different terrains affected tactical options, observing how commanders made decisions under pressure. This practical education, combined with what appears to have been an intuitive grasp of military theory, transformed Amina into a strategist of remarkable capability. When her brother Karima became king following their mother's death, Amina was already recognized as a formidable military leader. She served as a senior commander in his army, leading expeditions and winning victories that expanded Zaza's influence. Then Karima died, and the throne passed to Amina. The year was approximately 1576, though exact dates are uncertain due to the fragmentary nature of surviving records. What is certain is that Amina inherited a powerful kingdom and immediately set about making it an empire. Within 3 months of taking the throne, she launched her first military campaign. This was not the action of someone uncertain of her mandate or hesitant about exercising power. This was a declaration: a new ruler had arrived, and that ruler intended to expand Zaza's dominance through military conquest. The target was carefully chosen, a neighboring territory whose control would strengthen Zaza's grip on regional trade routes. Amina led the army personally, establishing a pattern that would continue throughout her 34-year reign. She was not a ceremonial war leader who remained safely behind the lines. She was at the front, making tactical decisions in real time, visible to her troops, sharing their dangers. This leadership style inspired fierce loyalty and established her credibility in the most direct way possible, by demonstrating competence under fire. The campaign was a success, and it was the first of many. Over the next 3 decades, Amina launched expedition after expedition, systematically conquering territories and bringing them under Zaza's control. Contemporary accounts, limited as they are, describe a conqueror of extraordinary ambition and capability. She expanded Zaza's territory to its greatest extent in history, with some sources claiming her conquests reached as far as the Atlantic coast to the west and the Nile to the east, though these claims are likely exaggerated or refer to tributary relationships rather than direct control. What is undisputed is that Amina transformed Zaza from one power among several into the dominant force in the region. She achieved this through a combination of military victory and strategic acumen. Defeated enemies were not simply subjugated. They were incorporated into an expanding economic network that enriched Zaza while binding conquered territories to her rule through mutual interest. This was empire building in its most sophisticated form, using military power to create conditions for economic integration that made continued resistance impractical. Amina's military innovations were as important as her conquests. She is credited with introducing metal armor to Hausa warfare, a significant tactical advancement that gave her cavalry a decisive advantage over opponents still relying on traditional leather protection. She also fortified conquered cities, building defensive walls that became known as Amina's Walls, some of which survive to this day as archaeological evidence of her reign. These fortifications served multiple purposes. They protected newly acquired territories from counterattack, demonstrated Zaza's permanence and strength, and provided economic benefits by making the cities they surrounded more secure and attractive to merchants. The construction of these fortifications also reveals Amina's understanding of long-term strategic thinking. She was not content with conquest for its own sake. She built infrastructure that would maintain and consolidate her gains, transforming temporary military victory into permanent political control. This is the hallmark of great conquerors, the ability to think beyond the battlefield to the political and economic structures that sustain power. Her military campaigns followed patterns that suggest sophisticated strategic planning. Amina understood that warfare is an extension of politics and economics. She targeted territories that controlled key resources, particularly salt and metal trade routes. By controlling these routes, she controlled wealth, and wealth translated into military power, which enabled further conquests in a self-reinforcing cycle. She also demonstrated flexibility in her approach. Some conquests were achieved through overwhelming military force. Others were accomplished through intimidation, with targeted displays of power that convinced potential enemies that resistance was futile. Still others involved negotiation after military pressure, allowing defeated rulers to retain positions of authority within Zaza's expanding system in exchange for tribute and loyalty. This adaptability prevented her from becoming predictable and kept potential enemies off balance. They could never be certain whether Amina would seek total conquest, negotiated submission, or something in between, and this uncertainty itself became a weapon. But conquest alone does not explain Amina's significance. What makes her truly exceptional is how she maintained power and authority in a context that was fundamentally hostile to female rule. Every decision she made, every campaign she launched, every policy she implemented was scrutinized through the lens of her gender. Her male counterparts could make mistakes and remain in power. Amina had no such luxury. Any significant failure would have been attributed to her being a woman and likely would have triggered efforts to remove her from the throne. This meant she had to be not just good, but exceptional. She had to win consistently, rule effectively, and demonstrate strength continuously. The psychological burden of this must have been enormous. To know that you are held to a higher standard than any male ruler, that your failures will be magnified and attributed to your gender while your successes will be minimized as exceptions or luck, this creates a constant pressure that most people cannot imagine. Yet Amina not only survived under these conditions, she thrived, ruling for over 3 decades and achieving military successes that would be remarkable for any ruler regardless of gender. Her personal life became another battlefield in the contest over her legitimacy. According to some accounts, Amina never married, choosing to avoid the complications that marriage would bring to her rule. Other sources claim she took many lovers, particularly from among defeated enemies, but refused to marry or grant any man permanent status that might threaten her authority. There are even more controversial accounts suggesting she executed lovers after brief relationships to prevent any man from claiming influence over her. Whether these accounts are accurate or represent hostile propaganda designed to portray her as cruel or sexually deviant is unclear. What is clear is that Amina navigated the question of marriage and sexuality in a way that preserved her political independence. In a world where women's power was typically mediated through relationships with men, through marriage, regency, or as the mother of male rulers, Amina refused that framework entirely. Her power was her own, derived from her own abilities and maintained through her own actions. This was revolutionary, and it threatened the patriarchal assumptions that structured political life. The military campaigns continued year after year. Amina's army became one of the most feared forces in West Africa, renowned for discipline and effectiveness. She personally led at least one major campaign per year throughout most of her reign, an exhausting pace that speaks to both her physical endurance and her understanding that visible, active military leadership was essential to maintaining her authority. In a political culture that valued martial prowess, she could not delegate warfare to subordinates without undermining the foundation of her power. She had to be seen, had to be present, had to risk herself alongside her warriors. This was the price of being a female ruler in a male-dominated military culture. Male rulers could command from a distance, their authority assumed and unquestioned. Amina had to prove hers continuously through personal participation in the most dangerous arena of all, the battlefield. That she did this successfully for decades, surviving numerous campaigns without suffering a decisive defeat, demonstrates not just courage but also tactical skill. She knew how to calculate risk, how to position herself for maximum visibility without maximum danger, how to retreat when necessary without appearing weak. Her reign also saw significant economic development. The territories she conquered were not simply plundered and abandoned. They were integrated into Zaza's economy, contributing to a period of prosperity that enriched the kingdom. The fortifications she built protected merchant caravans, encouraging trade. The military power she projected made Zaza's markets among the safest and most profitable in the region, attracting traders from across West Africa and beyond. There are references in Arabic sources to the wealth of Zaza during this period, descriptions of markets filled with exotic goods, of a royal court that rivaled those of North African kingdoms in splendor and sophistication. This economic success was not incidental to Amina's military campaigns. It was their purpose. She understood that military power without economic foundation is unsustainable, that conquest only matters if it generates wealth that can fund further military operations and internal development. This holistic understanding of power, recognizing the interconnections between military, political, and economic strength, is what separates great rulers from merely successful generals. Yet despite these accomplishments, despite a reign that by any objective measure ranks among the most successful in West African history, Amina's legacy has been systematically minimized and questioned. Colonial historians, arriving centuries after her death, often treated her as a legend rather than a historical figure, suggesting that the accounts of her conquests were exaggerations or folklore. This skepticism was not applied equally to male rulers whose accomplishments were documented to similar degrees. When European sources mention male African rulers, they are treated as historical figures. When they mention powerful African women, suddenly the standards of evidence become impossibly high, and the accounts are dismissed as mythology. This double standard reveals the ideological work being done. Accepting Amina as a historical figure, accepting that she conquered nations and ruled successfully for decades, requires acknowledging that African societies produced female military and political leaders of the highest caliber. This acknowledgement threatens multiple European colonial narratives simultaneously, that Africans were primitive, that women were naturally unsuited for leadership and warfare, that European colonization brought civilization to benighted peoples. Amina's existence contradicts all of these narratives, so her existence must be questioned, minimized, or explained away. The fortifications attributed to her, physical structures that exist to this day, provide archaeological evidence of her reign and her building programs. Yet even these have been subject to revisionist efforts to attribute them to other rulers or to suggest they were built over longer periods by multiple leaders rather than as part of Amina's campaigns. This despite oral histories and written accounts that consistently attribute these structures to her. The resistance to accepting Amina's historical reality is not about insufficient evidence. It's about ideological discomfort with what that evidence proves. Similar patterns appear across African history, where accomplishments are attributed away from African agency, where sophisticated achievements are explained as outside influence, where powerful rulers are dismissed as legend. Amina is not unique in facing this historical erasure, but her case is particularly egregious because the evidence of her reign is relatively strong compared to many pre-colonial African rulers, and yet the skepticism applied to her story remains intense. Her military campaigns demonstrate tactical sophistication that deserves analysis on its own terms, not as curiosity but as serious military history. Amina understood combined arms warfare, coordinating cavalry, infantry, and archers to maximize their respective strengths. She grasped the importance of intelligence, gathering information about enemy dispositions and capabilities before engaging. She showed skill in siege warfare, successfully reducing fortified positions through combinations of assault and blockade. She demonstrated strategic patience, sometimes conducting years-long campaigns to subdue particularly difficult targets rather than risking everything on a single decisive battle. These are the characteristics of an exceptional military mind, and they should be studied as such. Military academies that teach the campaigns of European and Asian conquerors should teach Amina's campaigns as well. The tactics she employed, the strategic problems she solved, the methods she used to maintain and expand an empire, these are universally relevant to understanding military history and strategic thinking. That they are not widely taught reflects not the quality of her generalship but the biases of those who determine what history is worth studying. The end of Amina's life is, like much of her story, obscured by incomplete records. Some accounts claim she died in battle around 1610, a warrior's death that would have been fitting for someone who lived as she did. Other sources suggest she died of natural causes after a long reign. The uncertainty itself is revealing. Male rulers of comparable importance typically have their deaths documented with some precision, the circumstances recorded and preserved. Amina's death, like too much of her life, was not deemed worthy of careful record-keeping by the literate classes who created the historical sources we rely on. This was not an oversight. This was a choice, a decision that her story did not merit the same careful documentation that male rulers received. Every gap in our knowledge of Amina represents a moment where someone chose not to record, not to preserve, not to honor her memory with the thoroughness that her accomplishments deserved. These are not neutral absences. They are the fingerprints of historical erasure. Yet Amina survived in memory despite these efforts to forget her. Oral traditions in northern Nigeria kept her story alive, passing it from generation to generation as a source of pride and inspiration. She became a legendary figure, which ironically contributed to colonial historians dismissing her as purely mythological. The fact that people remembered her with reverence and honor, that they celebrated her accomplishments in songs and stories, was used as evidence against her historical reality. This perverse logic, that being remembered too well makes you less likely to be real, was never applied to male rulers who also lived on in legend. But for Amina, her survival in cultural memory became another weapon in the campaign to deny her historical existence. Only in recent decades, as historians have begun to seriously engage with oral traditions as historical sources and to challenge the colonial biases that shaped earlier scholarship, has Amina begun to receive recognition as the historical figure she was. Archaeological evidence, combined with careful analysis of written sources and oral traditions, has confirmed the broad outlines of her reign and her accomplishments. The significance of Amina extends beyond her individual achievements. She represents a counternarrative to virtually every assumption about gender, race, and capability that has structured global power relationships for the past several centuries. She was an African woman who conquered nations through military brilliance and strategic thinking at a time when European thought was crystallizing ideas about African inferiority and female incapacity. Her existence proves that these ideas were wrong, that they were never based on objective assessment of human capability but on the need to justify systems of oppression and exploitation. This is why her story has been suppressed and why recovering it matters so urgently. Amina is not just one remarkable individual. She is evidence of what was possible before colonialism, of what could be possible again if we dismantle the ideological structures that colonialism left behind. She proves that greatness is not the property of any particular race or gender, that leadership, courage, and genius are human qualities that can emerge anywhere when people have the opportunity to develop them. Her legacy has experienced a renaissance in recent decades. In Nigeria, she is now celebrated as a national hero. Her image appears on currency. Schools and streets bear her name. She has become a symbol of female empowerment and African achievement, an answer to anyone who suggests that women cannot lead or that African history is barren of great figures. This celebration is overdue and deserved, but it also highlights how much time was lost, how many generations grew up not knowing this story because it had been buried under layers of colonial distortion and patriarchal suppression. How many young girls in Nigeria and across Africa could have been inspired by Amina's example if her story had been taught consistently? How many women were told they could not lead, could not fight, could not rule, when Amina's example proved otherwise? These questions are painful because they force us to confront the cost of erasure, not just in the past but in the ongoing present where historical narratives still shape what people believe is possible. Amina's fortifications, her walls, stand as physical testament to her reign. They are monuments more enduring than most written records, stones placed by her command that have outlasted empires. When you stand before these walls, you are standing before evidence that cannot be explained away or dismissed as legend. These structures required organization, resources, labor, and vision. They required a ruler capable of projecting power across vast distances and maintaining that power long enough to complete massive construction projects. They required someone who thought in terms of generations, who built not just for immediate tactical advantage but for long-term strategic position. These walls prove Amina was real, her power was real, her vision was real. They are her final argument against those who would erase her, stones that refuse to forget even when human memory fails. The accounts of her military campaigns, found in various historical sources, describe a conqueror who expanded her kingdom through dozens of successful military operations over 3 decades. They describe captured cities, defeated armies, negotiated surrenders, and tribute exacted from conquered territories. They describe a ruler who maintained her power against rivals, who defended her territory against external threats, who built alliances and broke them when necessary. These are not the characteristics of a legend or a myth. These are the characteristics of a historical figure, a ruler who existed in the complicated reality of politics and warfare, who made decisions with imperfect information and high stakes. The fact that this ruler was a woman does not make the accounts less credible. It makes them more remarkable, because she achieved all of this while navigating barriers that male rulers did not face. What must it have been like to be Queen Amina? To know that you were smarter than the generals who served you, more strategic than the rival rulers you outmaneuvered, more capable than the men who believed they should be ruling instead. To endure the constant scrutiny, the whispers, the challenges to your authority that came not from legitimate political opposition but from simple refusal to accept that a woman could hold power. To win battle after battle, campaign after campaign, year after year, and still face skepticism about your capability. The mental strength required for this is staggering. Most people would have broken under the pressure, would have internalized the doubt, would have convinced themselves that perhaps they didn't deserve the power they held. Amina did not break. She expanded her power. She conquered more territory. She built walls that would last centuries. She took every challenge and transformed it into an opportunity to prove, once again, that she was exactly what she claimed to be, a ruler without equal in her time and place. Her story forces us to ask uncomfortable questions about our own time. How many contemporary Aminas are being held back by systems that refuse to recognize their capability? How many women of genius are being channeled into subordinate roles because the path to top leadership remains blocked by gender? How many potential conquerors, not in the military sense but in business, science, politics, the arts, are we losing because we still haven't fully dismantled the ideological structures that insisted women couldn't lead? Amina's story is not just history. It's a mirror held up to our present, reflecting back all the ways we continue to waste human potential by allowing gender to determine opportunity. Every time a woman is passed over for leadership in favor of a less qualified man, we are reenacting the same dynamic that tried to keep Amina from power. Every time a woman's accomplishments are minimized or attributed to someone else, we are continuing the same erasure that tried to remove Amina from history. The specific mechanisms have evolved, but the underlying dynamic remains, patriarchy protecting itself by refusing to acknowledge female excellence. The fire and strategy that characterized Amina's reign were not separate elements but intertwined aspects of a comprehensive approach to power. The fire represented her willingness to use force, to risk battle, to pursue conquest aggressively when circumstances demanded it. The strategy represented her ability to think several moves ahead, to understand how each military action fit into a larger political and economic vision, to build structures that would outlast immediate military victory. Together, these qualities made her a complete ruler, someone who could win on the battlefield and govern effectively in peacetime. This combination is what separates great rulers from mere successful generals or competent administrators. Amina possessed both aspects in abundance, and she exercised them over a reign that spanned more than 3 decades. This is not a brief flash of success or a lucky break. This is sustained excellence over time, consistently delivering results in the most demanding arena imaginable, the leadership of a state in a competitive, dangerous environment. If there is a lesson in Amina's story, it is this: excellence will not be denied forever. Suppress a legacy, minimize an achievement, erase a name from the official record, and still, somehow, the truth survives. It survives in oral traditions, in physical structures, in the memories of people who refuse to forget, in the work of historians who question received narratives. It survives in the act of someone, decades or centuries later, asking, wait, what really happened? Who else was written out of this story? Whose accomplishments were attributed to someone else? These questions are how erasure is undone, how suppressed histories are recovered, how people like Amina reclaim their rightful place in the historical record. The process is slow, often frustratingly so. Amina died more than 400 years ago, and only now is she beginning to receive widespread recognition. But the process, once started, is inexorable. Truth has a gravity that pulls scholarship toward it eventually. The lies and distortions that protected patriarchal and colonial narratives are not sustainable indefinitely. They collapse under the weight of accumulating evidence and the pressure of people demanding better, more accurate, more complete histories. Queen Amina of Zaza conquered nations. She built an empire. She led armies to victory after victory. She ruled for over 30 years. She built fortifications that stand to this day. She expanded her kingdom's territory and wealth to unprecedented levels. She did all of this as a woman in a world that insisted women could not do these things. She did it despite every barrier, every challenge, every attempt to minimize or erase her achievements. She did it so thoroughly, so undeniably, that even centuries of suppression could not completely remove her from history. The walls she built remain. The accounts of her campaigns survive. The memory of her reign persists. And now, finally, the world is beginning to acknowledge what should never have been in doubt. Queen Amina was one of history's great conquerors, a ruler whose accomplishments would be celebrated without question if she had been a man. The fact that she is only now receiving that celebration says nothing about her and everything about us, about the stories we've been told, about the histories we've accepted without question, about the biases we've inherited and too rarely examined. Her story is an indictment of historical practice that privileges certain narratives while suppressing others, and it is an invitation to do better, to seek out the suppressed stories, to question who has been written out and why, to insist on a more complete, more honest account of human history. Let her walls stand as monuments not just to her power but to the power of truth. Let her story remind us that greatness cannot be permanently hidden, that excellence eventually breaks through even the most determined efforts at suppression. Let her legacy inspire not just celebration but action, a commitment to uncovering other suppressed histories, to questioning other received narratives, to building a historical understanding that reflects all of human experience rather than the narrow slice that served particular power structures. Queen Amina conquered nations. The question is, what will you do with her story now that you know it? Will you share it, adding your voice to those working to restore her rightful place in history? Will you seek out other stories like hers, other legacies that wait to be recovered? Will you question what else you weren't taught and why? The story doesn't end with knowing. It begins there, with each person who learns the truth becoming part of the process of ensuring it's never suppressed again, ensuring that the next generation doesn't have to rediscover what should never have been hidden. That's how we honor Amina's memory, not just by remembering her, but by refusing to let her story remain the exception, by insisting that women's achievements, African achievements, the full range of human accomplishment, be recognized, celebrated, and taught. The fire she brought to conquest, bring to the recovery of suppressed histories. The strategy she brought to building an empire, bring to dismantling the ideological structures that keep those histories suppressed. That is the legacy worthy of a queen who conquered nations.